Good morning. The chapter for today is the Delhi Sultanate. In this slide, we will see the subheadings of the chapter. Spread of Islam to India and early conquests of the Arabs, foundation of the Turkish rule in India, sources to reconstruct the Delhi Sultanate, the slave dynasty, the Khaljis, the Tughlaq dynasty, later dynasties, administration of the Sultanate, spirit of harmony and cooperation. Spread of Islam in India and early conquest of the Arabs. The Islamic culture was introduced in India by the Arabs, who entered India as traders and later made their settlements on the western coast of India. In Gujarat, they received liberal protection from Hindu rulers, and the Zamorin of Calicut patronized the Arab traders. In the beginning of 18th century AD, the Arabs under Muhammad bin Qasim conquered the Indian territories of Sindh and Multan. These victories were short-lived because of the death of Muhammad bin Qasim in 716 AD. But the Arabs could have a really intimate knowledge of Indian astronomy, numericals, and other branches of knowledge, which, according to Havel, they carried to Europe. Foundation of the Turkish rule in India. Muhammad of Ghazni made several invasions on India. He raided many cities including Mathura, Kannauj, Gwalior and Somnath and carried away India's rich treasures to his country. But Muhammad was not a ruler so far as India was concerned. In fact, the foundation of Turkish rule in India was laid by Muhammad Ghori. His first invasion was directed against Multan in 1175 AD. In 1192, he eventually defeated Prithviraj Chauhan, the ruler of the vast territories from Ajmer to Delhi. He then went back to Ghazni, leaving Qutbuddin Aibak in charge of his territories in India. However, in 1194, he again led an army to fight Jaichand, the ruler of Kannauj and the neighboring regions. He returned to Ghazni, and during his absence, Qutbuddin had to quell many revolts and disturbances in India. Muhammad Ghori, who died in 1206, left no male heir to succeed him. Qutbuddin Aibak laid the foundation of the Delhi Sultanate under a new dynasty, popularly known as the Slave Dynasty. From 1206 to 1526, as many as 5 dynasties ruled over the Delhi Sultanate. Sources to reconstruct the Delhi Sultanate. There are many literary and archaeological sources to reconstruct the period of Delhi Sultanate. Literary sources. The literary sources are many, such as the Tarikh-i Firoz Shahi, authored by Ziauddin Barani, Prithvi Raja Raso, authored by Chand Bardai, and the writings of Minhaj-us-Siraj. Barani's work starts with the accession of Balban in 1266 and comes down to the 6th year of reign of Firoz Tughlaq. Chand Bardai was the court poet of Prithviraj Chauhan, a great soldier and the ruler of Ajmer in Delhi. He defeated the Chandala king. We find in Prithviraj Raso an interesting account of Prithviraj's deeds of valor and of love. Ibn Battuta, a foreign traveler, reached Sindh in 1333 AD and spent many years at the court of Muhammad Tughlaq. He has left an interesting account of India of his times. Archaeological sources. There are many archaeological sources to know the religion, language, arts, social and political conditions of India in those times. Monuments. The sultans of Delhi built massive and magnificent structures. One of the architectural structures belonging to the period of Delhi sultans is Qutub Minar. The construction of Minar was started by Qutbuddin Aibak in 1199 AD when he was the viceroy of Muhammad Ghori. It was completed by Iltutmish in 1230. Qutb Minar. It is situated in Delhi. It received its name from Qutbuddin, a Muslim saint of Ush near Baghdad. Its main features are as follows. It is a circular tower which rises to the height of 72.5 meters. It has 5 stories tapering as they ascend and separated from each other by projecting balconies. The entrance to the tower is through the doorway on the northern side. Inside, there is a spiral stairway leading up to each balcony. Red sandstone, marble, and grey quartzite were used to construct the tower, which is the highest stone tower in India. There are many writings carved into Qutb Minar. Floral motifs like flower images are also engraved on this tower. Inscriptions. The mosques, tombs, minars, palaces, and other buildings were engraved with decorative lettering. These inscriptions, mostly in Persian, are a valuable source to reconstruct political, social, and religious history of the age of Delhi sultans. The Hindu structures have inscriptions in Sanskrit as well as in Hindi. There are writings carved into Qutb Minar also. As pieces of historical evidence, the inscriptions have sufficient merit. The Pehova inscription of the Pratihara king Mahendrapala suggests that Delhi was founded in 736 AD by Tomaras, a clan of Rajputs. It mentions that Tomaras ruled over the Haryana region with Dilika, that is Delhi, as their capital. The Sarban inscription, found in the village Sarban, South Delhi, contains a brief account of history of Delhi until the reign of Muhammad Tughlaq 1325 to 1351. Inscriptions in Sanskrit, Arabic, Persian, and a few other languages speak of linguistic synthesis and spirit of harmony and cooperation between the people of India. Inscriptions on temples, mosques, and other structures speak about the endowments and gifts to religious and charitable institutions. The Slave Dynasty, 1206 to 1290. Qutbuddin Aibak, as his master's lieutenant, had crushed a number of rebellions. Before his accession to the throne, he was already in the possession of many major parts of northern India. He ruled for 4 years only between 1206 to 1210 and did not find time to establish a sound system of administration. He, however, constructed 2 mosques, one at Delhi known as Quwwat-ul-Islam Mosque and other at Ajmer. He also started the construction of Qutb Minar, which was completed by Iltutmish, son-in-law of Aibak. Iltutmish, 1211 to 1236. Qutbuddin Aibak was succeeded by Aram Shah, but the nobles conspired against him. He was replaced by Iltutmish, who was regarded as the real consolidator of Turkish conquests in India. He made Delhi his capital and was the first Turkish ruler to introduce a purely Arabic coinage. Finding his sons incompetent to rule, Iltutmish chose his daughter Razia to be his successor. Razia, 1236 to 1240. Razia was brave and led her army in the battlefield, but the Turkish nobles were ganging up against her. She was defeated by Altunia, the governor of Sirhind. She later married Altunia, but the nobles plotted against them and they both were murdered in 1240. Naseeruddin Mahmud, 1246 to 1265. After about 6 years of internal strife, Naseeruddin Muhammad ascended the throne in 1246. The new king was pleasure-loving and weak and left the administration to Ghiyasuddin Balban, the leader of 40 leading Turks. Balban, 1266 to 1287. After Mahmud's death in 1266, Balban occupied the throne. He adopted a policy of sternness and severity. He established order in the neighborhood of Delhi and instilled fear in the minds of the Turkish nobles by inflicting severe punishment on them even for slight offenses. Some of them were even publicly flogged. The northwest frontier posts were strongly garrisoned because of the Mongols ever hammering on India's frontiers. Balban died in 1287. The Khaljis, 1219 to 1320. Balban's successors were very weak. A grandson of Balban, Qaubad, was murdered in 1290 and the Sultanate passed into the hands of Khaljis belonging to a clan whose members were scattered all over India. Jalaluddin Khalji, 1290 to 1296, was the first ruler of this dynasty. He ruled only for a brief period of 6 years and could not bring about any important change in the administrative personnel or structure of his government. Alauddin Khalji, 1296 to 1316. He was the nephew and son-in-law of Jalaluddin and came to the throne by murdering his aged uncle. Soon he embarked on conquest. He raided Malwa and Gujarat and also defeated the Rajput rulers of Ranthambore and Chittor. He then turned into the four wealthy kingdoms of the Deccan, Yadavas of Devagiri, the Kakatiyas of the Warangal, Hoysalas of Dwarasamudra, and Pandya kingdom with its capital at Madurai. No northern Indian army had earlier managed to come so far as the extreme south of the peninsula. The task of conquest of Deccan had been entrusted by Aladdin to his military commander Malik Kafur. Malik Kafur captured an immense booty which consisted of hundreds of elephants, thousands of horses, and gold and jewels in large quantities. But southern India was not annexed. Its rulers had to acknowledge the lordship of Delhi Sultan and pay him tribute in return for peace and protection. During Aladdin's rule, Mongols again launched their plundering attacks, but they were defeated. Aladdin's revenue and administrative measures. Aladdin also initiated a series of revenue and administrative measures to augment his resources. He revoked all land grants made as gifts to Muslim landlords or Muslim clerics. The treatment meted out to Hindu landlords called muqaddams or chowdhuries was typically harsh. The Sultan tried to regulate the prices of goods as well. This helped the common people, especially the soldiers. Market regulations. Control of the markets was an astonishing achievement of Alauddin Khalji. Since he maintained a large army on the relatively small pay, he had to ensure that essential commodities were available at low prices. This he did by regulating the prices of food grains, sugar and cooking oil, cloth, and the horses, cattle, slaves, and other commodities. The traders had to sell all the commodities at fixed rates. These regulations were enforced by two officers called Diwan-e-Riyasat and Shahana-e-Mandi. Those violating the regulations were severely punished. In brief, Alauddin once more revived the prestige and power, if not the dignity, of the court of Balban. He believed in the majesty of monarch and in his being God's representative on the earth. The Tughlaq dynasty. 4 years after Aladdin's death, his dynasty was replaced by another dynasty. It was Ghazi Malik, another general in revolt, who put an end to the rule of the Khaljis. He ascended the throne in 1320 and took the title of Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq. In 1325, he died when a victory pavilion built for a public reception in his honor collapsed. Muhammad Tughlaq, 1325 to 1315. Muhammad Tughlaq was a man of considerable ability and the only sultan to have received good education. He was a person with innovative ideas which, however, led him to ruin. Taxation in Doab. He wanted to raise the revenues by 5 to 10% by increasing the land tax and a few other taxes. In 1326, he increased the taxation in Doab, the territory between rivers Ganga and Yamuna. Unfortunately, at the very time there occurred a severe famine because of failure of rains. The people offered resistance, but Sultan's officers continued to realize taxes mercilessly. The cultivators were therefore forced to abandon their lands. The Sultan tried to help the cultivators by giving them loans to buy seeds, bullocks, etc. Arrangements were also made for digging of wells for irrigation purpose. But the scheme failed. The grant of loans came late. Since people had nothing to eat, they utilized the loans to meet their basic needs. As a result, even the usual revenue could not be realized from the Doab. Transfer of capital. In 1327, he decided to transfer his capital from Delhi to Devagiri, Daulatabad, with a view to having the capital situated in the middle of his kingdom. Moreover, Delhi was continuously threatened by Mongol raids. The Sultan wanted the capital town to be at the safer distance from the invaders. The Sultan ordered people to shift to Devagiri, which was renamed Daulatabad. He was bent upon taking all the inhabitants of Delhi to the new capital. No one liked the fort's move. In fact, Daulatabad was more than 1500 kilometers away from Delhi. The people suffered greatly from this fatigue, hardship, and mental torture. The scheme was a complete failure. As soon as the Sultan was convinced of the failure of his scheme, he ordered the people to return to their homes to Delhi. Token currency. In 1329, the Sultan introduced token currency by proclaiming that brass and copper coins could have the same use or functions as that of gold and silver coins. This experiment also failed. Soon the gold and silver coins disappeared and market was forged with copper coins manufactured by people at their homes came into circulation. Trade and businesses came to a standstill. All these failures affected the prestige of sovereign and led to the widespread discontent. It fomented repeated rebellions in many parts of the kingdom. Muhammad Tughlaq died while fighting rebellion in Sindh in 1351. Later Tughlaqs. Firoz Shah Tughlaq, a cousin of Muhammad Tughlaq, became the next Sultan. He faced a difficult situation because the empire had already started breaking up during Muhammad Tughlaq's regime. Firoz, though a distinguished military leader, made no serious attempt to recover the lost territories. But he was a great builder of gardens, schools, mosques, and irrigation canals. As a result, agriculture and trade flourished and there was an increase in the general prosperity of people. He died in 1388. Firoz Shah had left no strong successor. The Sultanate of Delhi, which had shrunk to the size of a small principality, began to disintegrate. Provincial governors and other ambitious chiefs everywhere hoisted the flag of revolt. Timur, who was popularly known as the Timur the Lame, invaded Delhi in 1398. His victory was complete. Timur had no desire to stay in India, but his invasion completed the dissolution of Tughlaq kingdom, which somehow managed to linger on till 1413. Later dynasties. Timur had entrusted the governance of Multan, Lahore, and Dipalpur to his deputy Khizr Khan, who became ruler of Delhi in 1414. He laid the foundation of the Sayyid dynasty, which ruled from 1414 to 1451. Bahlol Lodi, an Afghan governor of Lahore and Sirhind, seized Delhi in 1451. He died in 1489. He was succeeded by his son Sikandar Lodi. He is said to be the greatest of Lodi kings. He suppressed rebellious chiefs and moved the capital from Delhi to Agra in order to keep closer control over the eastern provinces. After Sikandar's death, his eldest son Ibrahim became the ruler in 1517. Unlike his father, he could not keep the Afghan and Turki nobles in good humor. He could not recover from the crushing defeat at the hands of Rana Sanga of Mewar. He alienated the governor of Punjab, Daulat Khan Lodi, who invited Babur, the ruler of Kabul, to invade India and overthrow Ibrahim. Babur defeated Ibrahim at the famous Battle of Panipat in 1526 and laid the foundation of the Mughal Empire in India. Administration of the Sultanate. The polity. The Muslim state in India, as elsewhere, was a theocracy. It was a system in which the Sultan ruled in the name of God and Islam was the religion of state. The Sultan and the central administration. The Sultan of Delhi was an unlimited despot. He was the chief executive of the state and he was also the highest judicial authority. The Sultan was the commander-in-chief of the army. His powers were very wide. He was responsible for the safety and security of the state. There was no constitutional method to remove a king from the throne. He could be removed only by a successful revolt, which meant a civil war. The ministers. The Sultan, however, could not manage the task of administration single-handed. The highest officer in the government was the Wazir, the chief minister. Other key functionaries and ministers were the Diwan, the finance minister, the Qazi, chief judge, and Aris, the army minister. The special responsibility of army minister was to recruit, equip, and pay the soldiers. Alauddin Khilji introduced the system of branding the horses so that the soldiers did not maintain poor quality of horses. The sultans also maintained a large number of elephants trained for the war purposes. Provincial administration. The provinces were placed in the charge of governors called Naib Sultans. The most important provinces under Khaljis and Tughlaqs were those of Jaunpur, Malwa, Khandesh, Gujarat, Bengal, and the Dakshin, which is called Deccan. The governors were required to maintain a powerful army and provide military aid to Sultan in times of war. In each province, there was a regular department for collection of land revenue and other taxes. Local administration. These provinces were divided into smaller units of administration called shiks, each under shikdar. Each shik was divided into number of parganas which corresponded to the modern day tehsils or subdivisions. The village was the smallest unit of administration. It had its own panchayat to settle disputes. Each village had a revenue officer called patwari. Sources of revenue. The main sources of revenue were as under land tax, usually 1/10 of the produce, the booty captured in the wars, a religious tax, zakat levied upon Muslims only, and poll tax, jizya charged from non-Muslims. According to some historians, jizya was not realized by all the sultans of Delhi. A few other taxes were a tax on import of goods, the house tax, the grazing tax, and number of other minor taxes. Land revenue continued to be the most important source of income for the Sultanate of Delhi. Spirit of harmony and cooperation. The Turkish state was a theocracy in which Islam was the religion of state, but a few Turkish rulers knew that unless Hindus cooperated with them, Muslim soldiery and nobility could not be sustained. The intermingling of Persian and Arabic words with Hindi led to the evolution of a common language which came to be known as Urdu. It was also known as the camp language. The soldiers who stayed in camps in and around Delhi used the local language Hindi, although much of their vocabulary was drawn from Persian, the court language. The Persian script was used to write Urdu. The Sufi saints and a number of religious thinkers and social reformers brought in amity and goodwill between the Hindus and Muslims. Guru Nanak Dev, Kabir, and other saints preached that God is one and must be worshipped with love and devotion. The message of religious toleration made a profound impression on people of all communities. Slowly but surely, Hindustani way of life was evolving.